Let the doors be opened, que l'on ouvre les portes. Somebody's going to ask for UC, right? Yes, member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And weren't those pages wonderful in singing "O Canada"? They have created such a sense of harmony in this House, and there have been discussions amongst the parties, and if you seek it, I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following motion: that notwithstanding any standing order or usual practice of the House, the deferred recorded division on the opposition motion scheduled for today be taken first.
All those opposed to the honourable member moving the motion will please say nay. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. All those opposed to the motion will please say nay. Carried. Statements by members. The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Van East want the federal government to stop the invest now, regulate later approach of the Prime Minister's AI data factory strategy. People are deeply concerned that the proposed AI data centers in dense residential neighborhoods will bring constant air pollution from on-site diesel generators, 24/7 noise, and impacts on water. It makes no sense to have water-intensive AI data centers on valuable land near their homes while historic drought conditions and water restrictions loom. Virginia, home to the largest concentration of data centers in the world, learned that industrial-scale data centers is incompatible in residential neighborhoods. In Ireland, 22% of their power supply is now reportedly used by data centers, adding hundreds of dollars to home hydro bills. In the middle of an affordability and climate crisis, Van East constituents want people's right to housing, quality of life, water security, and affordable home power supply to come first ahead of tech giants.
The honourable member for South Surrey White Rock.
Mr. Speaker, this week we celebrate National Accessibility Week, which began in 1988. Inspired by Rick Hansen's Man in Motion World Tour, this week honors the contributions of Canadians with disabilities and reminds us that we can always build a more inclusive and accessible society. This year's Canadian theme is Building a Strong, Accessible Canada. More than 8 million Canadians face barriers in everyday life. Many of these obstacles are built into our homes and workplaces. As the father of a son with a disability and a friend of Rick Hansen and Canada's first Chief Accessibility Officer, Stephanie Cadieux, I have seen firsthand the importance of designing our communities equitably. This week, we celebrate the progress we've made so far and acknowledge the work of advocates whose leadership continues to break down barriers and inspire positive change. Together, we can continue building communities where everyone can participate and thrive. Let's create a fair and welcoming society for everyone.
The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Mr. Speaker, as we recognize Seniors Month in Ontario, as well as Seniors Week in Alberta and British Columbia, it is important that we not only celebrate seniors, but also highlight and confront the challenges too many of them are still facing today. Too many single seniors, often older women, face high living costs while receiving fewer financial supports than couples. A single senior can pay almost 10 times more in taxes than a couple with the same income, despite facing many of the same household expenses. At a time when affordability remains a serious challenge, many are struggling simply to keep up with housing, grocery, and everyday costs. Single seniors should not be penalized by our tax system simply because they live alone.
The honourable member for Humber River Black Creek.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to invite all parliamentarians to join us this evening for a special screening of Nikai Walks, hosted with our trusted partners at YACE, an organization doing extraordinary work with young people in Toronto. Taking place later today in Wellington 310, this powerful documentary tells the story of resilience, recovery, and community in the face of gun violence. As we approach the National Day Against Gun Violence on June 5th, It offers a timely and deeply meaningful opportunity to reflect and to learn. I'm especially pleased to welcome to the Hill Devin Jones, founding director of YACE, and Nikai Foster, the young man at the heart of this film, and the director Rico King. I encourage all of my colleagues to attend this important and inspiring event. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Haldimand Norfolk.
As we mark Seniors Month in Ontario, we're reminded that modernization must include everyone. As new digital systems and artificial intelligence reshape daily life, we must recognize that not every Canadian has equal access to technology. In many rural communities, reliable internet and cell service still do not exist. Seniors tell us that they're increasingly being excluded as essential services like banking become digital by default. We cannot create a future where some Canadians are able to participate in society. Progress is not measured by how advanced our systems become. It is measured by whether people still feel seen, valued, and able to participate in society. Because no Canadian should lose access to society because technology has moved faster than infrastructure. Canadian seniors are not obstacles to modernization. They are part of Canada's great future.
The honourable member for Acadianapolis.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, today I would like to pay tribute to the career and service of Colonel Luc Vachon as he prepares to retire from the Canadian Armed Forces after more than 33 years of loyal and dedicated service to Canada.
Throughout his career, the Royal Canadian Air Force, Colonel Vachon served with professionalism, integrity, and distinction in a wide range of operational staff and command appointments, contributing to Canada's commitments both at home and abroad. As commander of 14 Wing Greenwood, he demonstrated exceptional leadership and a deep commitment to military members, civilian employees, and families who served at one of Canada's most important air wings.
I enjoyed working alongside him on projects that have benefited both military personnel and civilians in our region. His dedication has earned him immense respect within our community.
Of Acadianapolis and all Canadians, I want to thank Colonel Luc Vachon for his remarkable service to our country and wish him every success and happiness in his retirement. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, this weekend from June 5th to 7th, thousands will gather in Stony Plain to enjoy the Stony Plain Farmers' Days Rodeo and Exhibition. Organized in partnership with the Kinsman Club of Stony Plain, Farmers' Days showcases the agricultural heritage, community spirit, and volunteerism that make our region such a special place to call home. For 3 days, Stony Plain will come alive with the Kinsman Rodeo, parades down Main Street, a midway with games, and live entertainment, and the Farmers' Days Market featuring over 160 vendors. Families can enjoy activities from the heavy horse pull to train rides and petting zoos, fun for the whole family. Farmers' Days is a celebration of the best of our Parkland region, our hardworking people, volunteers, local businesses, and the strong community spirit that brings neighbors together year after year. I invite everyone to come and enjoy this great celebration in our region. Finally, I want to thank the town of Stony Plain, the Kinsman Club, sponsors and volunteers and organizers for making this celebration possible. I wish everyone a fun and enjoyable Farmers' Days weekend.
The honourable member for Oakville West.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the outstanding young leaders of Oakville West Youth Council who are joining us here at the Parliament Hill today. This has been a remarkable year for this group. Together, we visited the Halton Regional Police Headquarters to see the work that our law enforcement does. Sheridan College to learn about future career paths to pursue. Oakville Museum to learn about why Black History Month is important and Oakville's contribution to it. They also participated in a mock committee study on artificial intelligence, among many other meaningful experiences, including today's meet and greet with the Prime Minister. At every step, they have demonstrated curiosity, leadership, and genuine commitment to learning and serving their communities. Spending time with these young people gives me tremendous hope for future. They are thoughtful, driven, and deeply engaged. They are not simply preparing to become leaders someday, they are already leading today. To the Oakville West Youth Council, thank you.
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today with great sorrow for our community in Yellowhead. 2 men and 2 children lost their lives on the Otis Road last Friday. While our RCMP investigation is ongoing, local leaders have warned for years that a tragedy like this would happen on that road. In March, I met with the HoC's First Nation Council to learn about the long history of trying to get this road fixed. I drove the road myself, and it was atrocious. The nation repeatedly sought assistance from this Liberal government, but its requests were ignored by multiple ministers. So they asked me to deliver a binder documenting the safety concerns and requests for action, which I did in March in the House. Yet months later, still no action. Today, a community is grieving an unimaginable loss. My thoughts and prayers are with the families, loved ones, and all those affected by this tragedy. No more procrastination. I call on this Liberal government to work with the Clearwater County and the province of Alberta to finally provide us the share of funding for this needed road to be, the HoC's road to be safe. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Joliette Manawan. Mr. Speaker, Amnesty International has launched a campaign to highlight the glaring underfunding of housing in Indigenous communities. The organisation has focused on the situation of the Atikamekw community of Manawan. Isolated and depending on federal funding, Manawan is facing a serious housing crisis. Housing is inadequate, often substandard, overcrowded and poorly maintained, conditions that violate the right to adequate housing. The consequences are severe: the spread of disease, lack of privacy, increased violence, poverty and homelessness. Despite the Council's efforts, the lack of funding persists. Amnesty International and the community are calling for urgent action. We endorse these demands to invest heavily and sustainably, to work in partnership with communities, to adapt policies to guarantee dignified living conditions and to end discrimination. Chef Sipi Flamand has taken these demands directly to the Prime Minister. Now it is our turn to ask him to act, and to act now.
The Honourable Member for Markham-Stouffville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Although we call them rare diseases, cumulatively they affect over 3.2 million Canadians. They are debilitating and potentially life-threatening. One Canadian family watched their healthy 14-year-old child suddenly begin suffering from severe headaches, vision problems, and exhaustion. After months of uncertainty, the child was diagnosed with glioblastoma, an aggressive and deadly brain cancer. Through early intervention, surgery, treatment, and extraordinary courage, that child survived and today continues to inspire others facing rare diseases. Our government has committed $1.4 billion through agreements with all provinces and territories under the National Strategy for Drugs for Rare Diseases to improve access to affordable and life-saving treatments. The Canadian Organization for Rare Diseases is calling on Parliament to strengthen the next phase of the strategy beyond 2027 by improving access to diagnostics, treatments, research and care for all Canadians living with rare diseases. No family should lose hope because help came too late. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Flamborough, Glanbrook, Brant North.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister promised Canadians the fastest growing economy in the G7. Instead, he delivered the only recession in the G7. He promised growth. Canada lost more than 112,000 jobs in just 3 months. He promised investment. Business investment has fallen for 5 consecutive quarters. He promised prosperity. Today, 1 in 4 Canadians face food insecurity. The recession is real. I hear it from families and seniors every day. It is real for families struggling to afford groceries. It's real for workers coming home from work and telling their kids they no longer have a job and that they're going to have to sell the house. It's real for Canadians watching their savings disappear while costs continue to rise. The Leader of the Opposition has called upon the Prime Minister to hold an emergency debate to explain the plan to reverse the recession these Liberals have created, because Canadians deserve answers. Canadians deserve a plan, and Canadians deserve a government that will unleash Canada's economy once again.
L'honorable député d'Hochelaga.
The Honourable Member for Hochelaga Rosemont Est. Mr. Speaker, Hochelaga has grown around a core value: solidarity. In this regard, the Hochelaga Maisonneuve Community Kitchen, which works to promote food security and social and professional integration, is a shining example of the strength of the group. To the HMCK, 40 years old. Knowing you, I suspect you've taken care of the cake yourself. 4 decades of bringing together people, feeding, equipping, training thousands of people by focusing on dignity, trust and kindness. For over 10 years, it has been to Benoit de Perlong, who's with us today, hyperactive, big-hearted, innovative, ambitious and persuasive chap, that we owe the development of the food hub on Rue Hochelaga, a transformative project combining urban agriculture, a seedling greenhouse and food processing. In closing, dear HMCK, I must warn everyone, their pickled carrots can be highly addictive.
The honourable member for Niagara West.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals elected a Prime Minister they thought was an economic genius. They got fooled that he was a master negotiator. He sold himself as the guy to hire in a crisis. Mr. Speaker, he caused a crisis in the UK and then ran away from it. Then he comes to Canada, deceives people with his fear-mongering, and causes a recession within a year. Canada is now the only G20 country in a recession. We have the highest household debt, the worst housing affordability, and unemployment, especially among young people, is at shocking levels. Investment is down for 5 straight quarters, but don't worry, folks, the Prime Minister's genius master plan, he hides from question period on the media. He blames everybody but himself and mutters something about needing more immigration to fix the messy...
I don't know if that was parliamentary. I'm sorry, I don't know if that was parliamentary. I'm going to have to stop the member. I'm going to have to stop the member there. That wasn't parliamentary. Not in my view, I'm sorry. We've been over this many, many times. The honourable member for Laval-les-Îles.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity today to highlight the remarkable work of the non-governmental organisation Medical Relief Group Canada, which promotes Canadian values, solidarity, generosity, and humanism, both here and abroad. Recently, the organisation delivered a large shipment of medicines to Lebanon and personally oversaw their distribution to ensure that this essential aid reached the most vulnerable people and those in greatest need. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to express my deep gratitude to the founders and leaders of this organisation for their vision that are on the Hill today, for their vision, dedication and leadership
Ici.
Here and abroad.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, we are seeing the tragic effects of Liberal policies on the economy. Liberals want to be judged by their intentions, announcements, illusions, and gimmicks. But Canadians will see the effects of Liberal policies at the grocery store aisle, at the gas pump, in the pink slips that are piling up, and in the real numbers reported by Statistics Canada. Mr. Speaker, the reports are in. Canada is the only G20 country in a recession. We have had recession levels of unemployment for months, with youth unemployment approaching 15%. 1 in 4 Canadians are food insecure, and food bank use has doubled since 2020. The Prime Minister isn't working, and he certainly isn't working for Canadians. Canadians want jobs, homes, and hope. There is hope for this great country, but Liberals need to stop pretending that everything is fine. It's not. Canadians want a government that leaves behind the illusions and instead focuses on delivering results.
The honourable member for Moncton Dieppe.
Mr. Speaker, today social workers from across Canada are gathered in Ottawa to celebrate the profession and mark 100 years of the Canadian Association for Social Workers. Having worked in the field myself before entering politics, I fully appreciate the vital role that social workers play in supporting the delivery of health and social services in our communities, our families, and among the most vulnerable. At a time when Canada continues to face overlapping social, economic, and public health challenges, the role of social worker has never been more crucial. Throughout 2026, CASW and its 11 provincial and territorial partners will celebrate the centennial with the theme, Reflecting on Our Past, Reimagining Our Future. This theme is intended to guide the profession as it reflects on the evolution of social work, uplifts the voices of leadership shaping the profession today, and envisions the next 100 years grounded in equity and reconciliation. Please join me in celebrating social workers and the next 100 years of the profession in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions, questions orales, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The group of 20 nations are all faced with the same tariffs, wars, and energy prices. Yet 19 of the G20 countries are not in recession. One country is in recession. Will the leader of the only G20 country in recession please stand up?
That is not a question, it's a request. We'll go on to the next question.
Had 2 consecutive quarters of shrinking GDP, the only country in the G20 that can say that. We've lost 112,000 jobs in the first 3 months of this year. And that has left our country with a quarter of its people in food insecurity. Will the Prime Minister tell us whether we are in a recession or a technical recession?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, first may I wish the Leader of the Opposition a very happy birthday. Secondly, I'll even give him his question back, Mr. Speaker. Petit cadeau à vous.
A little gift for you.
What this government is doing is putting in place the foundations of an economy that will be stronger, more resilient, more independent. We are seeing, in the face of U.S. tariffs, in the face of global uncertainty, in the face of higher energy prices, we are seeing business investment accelerating. We are seeing wages growing twice the rate in the United States. We are seeing this country put in place the conditions for sustained prosperity.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate his birthday wishes. I am 47. But that's 50 with inflation. But what I really want as a Christmas gift from a birthday gift from this Prime Minister is someone who will actually answer the question. And Canadians deserve answer, not misinformation. We've had 2 consecutive declining quarters of GDP growth. We are the only country in the G7 that can say that. The only country in the G7 that has seen the economy shrink in 3 of the last 4 quarters, the only country whose GDP is smaller than it was a year ago when the Prime Minister took office. So, will he tell us, are we in a recession or a technical recession? Which is it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's very painful on someone's birthday when you give them a present and they give it back to you. Mr. Speaker, I'll do a little research for the Leader of the Opposition. If you'd like to ask the C.D. Howe Institute, they know the answer to that question. If they'd like to ask the OECD, which today predicts that Canada will have the 2nd strongest economy in the G7 this year and next. That is the answer, Mr.
Speaker. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's the only promise that he made during the elections. And it's the same thing he said a few days ago. But after he said that, we saw that Canada is the only country in the G20 that is in recession. So that means that Canadians are skipping meals. There are 112,000 Canadians who've lost their jobs. We have the 2nd worst unemployment rate in the G7. Can the Prime Minister stand up and answer a very simple question? Are we in a recession or just a technical recession? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, we have to correct the official record of Parliament. I made a number of promises during the election campaign. The first was to save Canadians from the terrible policies of the Leader of the Opposition. Second, the policies that this government has put in place are allowing us to create a more resilient, more prosperous, stronger, a more sustainable economy and a more independent economy. That's what we're doing.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
All he delivered was a recession. He promised he'd have the fastest growing economy in the G7. He's delivered the only recession in the G7. And while Canadians line up around the street to try and collect from the food bank, this Prime Minister spends $200,000 on in-flight meals for just 3 flights, including $4,200 on creme brulee, $593 on luxury Normandy buttercups. No wonder he's so out of touch with the people whose jobs he's killed. So can he tell us, will he ground his plane and stand up and tell us, are we in a recession?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I will tell this House is what I hear from international investors and businesses when we travel. What I heard in New York is that Canada is the most attractive destination for foreign infrastructure investment. What I hear from major global investors who want to invest more than $100 billion in this country, what we are already seeing, which is foreign investment that's running in this country at twice the rate of any other G7 economy. That is
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, obviously the multinational corporations that he is profiting are very pleased with the way things are going. As for the Canadian people who are living under his recession, it's another story. They don't have $200,000 meals on 3 private flights, Mr. Speaker. They don't have tax havens so that they can shelter from the high tax burden he imposes on everyone else. He can't even bring himself to utter the word recession, even though the textbook definition tells us that he's the only prime minister, the only leader in the G20 who's created one. So will he stand in the House and answer the question, are we in a recession or a technical recession?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are in an economy that is fundamentally being transformed by a government that has a plan, to create a stronger, more independent, more resilient economy, a sustainable economy, an economy that moves from reliance to resilience. And Mr. Speaker, we are already seeing business investment, Canadian business investment up 10% in machinery and equipment. We are seeing our non-U.S. exports up on course to double. We are seeing the strongest inbound investment in
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, another betrayal of Quebec culture. On day 2 of CUSMA negotiations, the government is already asking the CRTC to abandon the 15% increase in royalties required of major online streaming platforms like Netflix, Disney Plus, and Prime. After abandoning the digital services tax, Ottawa is once again sacrificing funding for cultural creation by allowing digital giants to avoid paying their fair share. We're talking about $3.4 billion. Does the Prime Minister know that he's supposed to defend our culture and not barter it away? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the government is starting by defending everyday Canadians. We are focused on affordability. This is a decision focused on affordability for families in Quebec and families across Canada. At the same time, we are investing $600 million more in Canadian culture and in Quebec culture. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister had already abandoned the digital services tax with no concession from Washington, not a single thing. In doing so, he deprived the cultural sector of $1.4 billion a year. Today, he's asking the CRTC to back down on the 15% that would have been taxed on major online streaming platforms. So that's $2 billion that would come from the United States. He's depriving the cultural sector of billions of dollars, which he claims he can compensate with $600 million taken from taxpayers' pockets. How can the Prime Minister justify that everyone is losing except for the American web giants? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I have news for the member for Belleuil-Chambly. Who pays for that tax on streamers? Well, everyday people with increased streaming costs. That's the truth. So we have chosen that we are going to focus on affordability to make sure that the cultural sector is supported and to focus on affordability for everyone. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. he is letting $3.4 billion a year from the United States go away, and he's taking $600 million out of taxpayers' pockets. By asking the CRTC to cancel the 15%, the Prime Minister is doing worse than capitulating. He's validating the Americans' claim that Quebec's culture and the French language are a barrier to trade. And by replacing those royalties with public funds, he's validating the Conservatives' criticism by making taxpayers foot the bill for the web giants. The Prime Minister says, I am weak in doing this. Is he going to reverse this cowardly decision? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the government is investing in Canadian culture, in Francophone culture, in Quebec culture. They are pillars of our identity. We have more than made whole the cultural sector with the decision taken today. And in the budget that the Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly was against, we have invested $750 million in the cultural sector.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
My question for the Prime Minister is about the human cost of Canada being the only G20 country in the recession. Zara from Toronto lost her administrative job at a real estate business. She can't find a new job and now has to sleep on a friend's couch. What's the Prime Minister going to tell her if he cares enough to stand up and answer? Is he going to tell her that she's just technically homeless and technically jobless?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to wish the Chief of the Opposition, Leader of the Opposition, a happy birthday. I hope his day improves. The government is focused on building a stronger economy. We recognize the scale of the challenges that this country is facing from abroad. We are focused on that administrator. We are focused on farmers in Battle River Crowfoot. We are focused on a future that is stronger, durable, more independent, more resilient, more sustainable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This is not a joke. This is a woman's life. This Prime Minister gave us the only recession in the G20, and he stands up and starts joking about her state of affairs. She's sleeping on someone's couch, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister stop being so flippant about the suffering that he's caused in the lives of Canadians and tell Zara, is her homelessness and joblessness just a technicality?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Well, thanks, Mr. Speaker. And you know what's not a joke? When you lose your job and there's nothing there to catch you. And yet if these Conservative members had their way, that's exactly what would have been facing Zara. In fact, they voted against the very measures that we put into place to protect people like Zara.
We really can't hear now. So not from the top, but the Minister may continue, but let's have a little more quiet so we can hear what the Minister has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I find a joke is that when this government steps up, not only to lay the foundation of prosperity for the future, but to protect people like Zara by putting into place things like modernized employment insurance, which they routinely laugh about, they vote against those measures, Mr. Speaker, time and
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the question is for the Prime Minister about the real human cost of Canada being the only country in the G7 and in the G20 that is in a recession. Brad from Ontario wrote me to say that his family hung on during the Trudeau years, but since this Liberal Prime Minister has taken over, he's now at risk of losing everything. He sold the home and had to get rid of all of the savings he had accumulated for his retirement. Will the Prime Minister have the decency to stand up, look Brad in the eye, and tell Brad, are we in a technical recession or a real recession?
The Honourable
Mr. Speaker, I speak to a lot of people like Brad in my own riding of Gatineau, and what they ask me is why such apparent glee on the part of the Leader of the Opposition and his troops when they march in here. Canada faces some economic headwinds from an unprovoked trade war. Blame Canada. That's right. Canada faces economic headwinds from a war in the Middle East. Blame Canada. People cannot help but notice the Leader of the Opposition and his entire bench walk in here with glee when Canada faces
the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, when there's only one country in the G20 that faces a recession, while all the other countries face the same wars and tariffs, then we know that it's appropriate to blame this Liberal government. And I can assure you, he talks about glee. Jacqueline has no glee. She actually had to put her dog down because she can't afford the veterinary bills along with the inflation in her food, her rent, and her gas. The Prime Minister actually cares about Jacqueline. Will he stand up and answer the question, are we in a recession or a technical recession? Which is it?
The Honourable Minister. Colleagues, please. An instant, please. Just a moment, please. I still haven't given the Minister the green light. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, what Canadians don't need at this time is these slogans, is these clips, is this empty rhetoric on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker. Jacqueline knows, and she should know, that every step of the way, the Leader of the Opposition has voted against every affordability measure on this House, Mr. Speaker. Jacqueline knows that, and we know it, and Canadians know it, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to affordability, we're going to stand with families, we're going to stand with workers, we're going to support our industry, we're going to build Canada strong together.
Colleagues, it's just too loud on the. It's too loud in the House. I won't point any fingers, but it's too loud. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the question was for the Prime Minister, and if he actually cared about the people who wrote these letters, he'd stand up and answer the questions himself, instead of having a member get up and condemn slogans and then list 5 of them in a row. Here's another letter, Mr. Speaker, from Thomas in Sarnia. He runs a painting business, but is now stuck in a bind. The cost of his paints are too high to keep his prices low, and if his prices are too high, nobody can afford to hire him. He's worried he's going to lose his business. This is the human cost of being the only country in the G20 that's in a recession. Will the Prime Minister tell Thomas, is this just a technical recession? Is he technically on the verge of bankruptcy?
Colleagues, James, Larry, come on, guys, come on. The Honourable Minister of Housing, the Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's important that we recognize the critical investments that we are making in the economy of Canada right now to help these same people that the opposition mentions. We yesterday announced investments in Quebec in infrastructure, $2.5 billion in community centers, infrastructure to build more housing, to scale up our affordable housing across the country. $1 billion that's invested to upgrade our hospitals and emergency rooms. Over $6 billion to invest in public transit, help people get around affordably, and to create the jobs that make this country prosperous. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This is the same pattern with this Prime Minister every time. He gets a fancy title, he turns it into an absolute disaster. A tiny group of insiders get fabulously rich, making everyone else poor, and when comes time to be accountable, he goes into hiding, not even able to respond to Canadians who wrote letters about their economic desperation, with Canada being the only G20 country in recession. Nathan from Ontario lost his job and isn't sure how he's going to cover expenses for his type 1 diabetes, as severance money is now running out. Will the Prime Minister have the decency and the courage to look Nathan in the eye and tell him
the Honourable Minister of Women and Gender Equality, Tourism and Small Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians are facing impacts of change, global uncertainty, and driven by U.S. tariffs, Mr. Speaker, and that is why our government has a clear plan. We're diversifying trade, creating good jobs in this country, building faster, investing in workers while making life more affordable. And that plan is working, Mr. Speaker. Canada is projected to have the fastest growing economy in the G7. We're going to take care of Canadians. And in fact, when it comes to affordability, an average family of 4 will save up to $20,000 this year, and that will help them with the average cost that they're experiencing each and every day. We're going to protect Canadians while building Canada strong.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we're now almost a week after Stats Canada reported that Canada had the only recession in the G20. The Prime Minister has been in hiding ever since. He has the worst attendance record in question period. While Canadians are losing their jobs, he won't even show up to do his job. I ask questions on behalf of Zara, Jacqueline, Brad, Kevin, Nathan, and countless others who don't know how they're going to pay their bills. Will you stand up for once, own up for once, and tell us, are we in a technical recession or a real recession? Which is it?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians don't take that leader.
Just a second. We're going to start over. The member's going to start over. Okay, let's give it another shot. Okay.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians don't take that party serious at all. You got the former failed leader doing bizarre social media videos, screaming at fences. You got the current failed leader doing empty parking lot press conferences with no substance, gimmicks, props, and slogans. On this side of the House, we are investing in major projects, housing, and trade diversification. Mr. Speaker, they're not serious about the economy. Canadians see it. Canadians know it. Canadians made a choice to stand behind a world-class statesman, a world-class business and economic leader who's going to build our country.
The Honourable Member for Joliette-Manawan. Mr. Speaker, Amnesty International has denounced the inhumane housing crisis faced in particular by the Atikamekw Nation of Manawan. In Manawan, up to 23 people might be found living crammed into housing that's often unsanitary. These conditions contribute to the development of respiratory diseases. They hinder children's development, their academic success, and even prevent them from meeting their basic needs. It exacerbates domestic violence. These are unacceptable living conditions that would never be tolerated anywhere else. Why does the government still tolerate the underfunding of Indigenous housing that plunges communities into these conditions?
The Honourable Minister for
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to hear for the first time a question on a very, very important file. We know that housing is something that's very, very important in Indigenous communities. That's why I am proud to work with my colleague, and we're going to launch the program to build Canada Strong, to build homes and to build homes in Indigenous communities with them to meet their specific needs. I'm proud to do that work with them, and we will continue to work forward in that way. The Honourable Member for Côte-Nord, Kawa-Wachigamak-Nitassinan. Mr. Speaker, the Indigenous housing crisis has been denounced for decades by every community. It's not just a housing issue, it's a question of human rights, education, health, and safety, and dignity. For 5 years now, the federal government has taken on the obligation under international law to resolve this crisis. The Assembly of First Nations of Quebec and Labrador has already calculated that there's a shortage of 10,000 housing units in Quebec alone, not to mention the 8,000 that need to be renovated and the 4,000 that need to be decontaminated. The federal government had promised that this would be fixed by 2030. When will they work with communities to develop a predictable and achievable plan? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For decades, there was underinvestment and discrimination in this file. I am proud to work with this government, the only government that's decided to take a position to add and increase homes under this file to meet the needs of Indigenous nations in Quebec and across the country. I'm proud to do this work. I am very happy to know that in the urban, rural, and northern building program, we're doing this work together, not just with First Nations, but with those who are living in urban areas as well. It's very important to do that work.
The government's excuses for the Liberal recession kept changing. First, they said it was world factors. Then we pointed out that none of the other G20 countries are in recession. Mexico, which shares a border with the U.S. and is fully integrated with the U.S. economy, is not in a recession. Only this country under this Liberal Prime Minister is in recession. So his explanation yesterday was we see some weakness in part because of clear decisions by the government. That's at least fair. He claims that we're not bringing enough immigration. If that's the case, Mr. Speaker, why is it that Canada has the lowest per capita GDP growth of any G7 country?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Energy. Mr. Speaker.
You are something the Leader of the Opposition conveniently forget and doesn't forget, depending how it serves him. That's why today, with the lumber tariff remain unjustified and unfair to workers, businesses, and communities, we've actually announced enhanced BDC loans, 2 new direct lending facilities, $400 million to regional development agencies, and billions of dollars to support our forestry projects across Canada. We're going to continue to work with province and territory.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister cannot even get up and defend his economic record. It is so bad. Instead, he has one of his backbenchers explain that they're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars on new bureaucracies that they've set up. That's exactly why the economy's in recession, because he's continued on with the same Liberal policies of the last 10 years, the same anti-development laws, the same expansion of the bureaucracy, the same corporate welfare, 12 new government agencies, and Canadians paying the bill with higher and higher prices. The question again, though, we all know that Canada is the only G20 country in recession. Can he explain why Canada has the lowest per capita GDP growth in the G7?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Canadians don't want theatrics. That Conservative leader knows full well that we are in a trade war. That is creating real headwinds for the Canadian economy. But, Mr. Speaker, we have a plan, and we are confident in that plan. Mr. Speaker, one key pillar of that plan is building infrastructure. Major projects in the national interest, community infrastructure like roads and bridges and hospitals right across this country with Canadian steel. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we made a historic investment in the skilled trades. That's how you build a Canada strong.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister really believed any of that, he'd get up and say it himself. But instead, he states a few falsehoods, and then he goes into hiding, and he can't defend his own position. Instead, he's spreading false information when he says investment is up. Let me quote Statistics Canada, just verbatim. From their own government stats agency. Business capital investment fell 0.7% in the first quarter of 2026, the 5th consecutive quarterly decline. Does this meet the master economist's definition of a technical recession? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, what Canadians are hearing here is not the sound of fury. It's the sound of nothing. He has no plan, no fiscal plan, no economic plan, no industrial plan, no defense and security plan, no supports.
Where is the attempt
track record of spending $9 million in his personal office in 2024.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The question was for the Prime Minister, but he continues to be unable to defend his own economic track record. This was supposed to be his great strength, but once again we see the same thing every time he goes anywhere. He gets a fancy title, a tiny group of people get very rich, making everybody else poor. There's a small group who get handouts and favors, whether for space pads or for $200,000 of meals in private jets, while the Canadian people end up paying the price with the only recession in the G20. Will he stand up today and tell us, are we in a technical recession or a real recession? Which is
the Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson Nicolau. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, in the House today, there's a lot of rhetoric, Mr. Speaker, coming from the other side. And let me say, Mr. Speaker, you know what? I've been traveling across the country talking to farmers. Nobody over there has been talking to farmers, Mr. Speaker. Nobody over there has been talking to farmers.
Definitely not going to finish on time today. The Honourable... Okay, colleagues, we got to get through this. We got to get through this. We got to get through this. We have to get through this. We've got to get through it. We've got to get through it. We've got to get through it. No, not from the top. Not from the top, though I'm tempted. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Mr. Speaker, you know, every time I get my feet in this House and talk about farmers, it's a good day, Mr. Speaker. It's a good day. And if that's what it takes to get a reaction over there about how important farming is in this country, then that's what we need to do, Mr. Speaker. And I'll do it every time, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable... York Centre. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the question was for the Prime Minister, and this is supposed to be his great strength. Remember, we were told he was a master economist. Well, I guess he must have some sort of unique ability to be the only leader in the G7 to find a way to negotiate his economy into a recession. Every other one of the 19 countries have avoided a recession. Mexico, neighbors with the United States as well, has avoided a recession. And it is because of the Liberal policies that he continues to implement and even accelerate that we find ourselves in this place. But the problem is the Prime Minister can't get us out of a recession if he can't first admit that we are in one. So will he stand today and tell us, are we in a recession?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Mr. Speaker, I want to share with everyone in the House and all Canadians listening some good news. Almost $1 billion for small craft harbors. What this means for Canada's rural, coastal, Indigenous communities is the place...
Can't hear. Okay, colleagues. Let's hear the answer. The Honourable Minister of the Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans may continue for now. Who knows? We may have to stop again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So these small craft harbors are the core of our rural, coastal, Indigenous communities. That support is generational. I I also am working with my colleagues across the country to ensure that the fish funds, another critical source of support for harvesters in this country, that funding is out shortly.
The honourable member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. Mr. Speaker.
Third day, which we also mark during National Disability Week. Cette semaine, nous soulignons.
This week, we highlight the contributions of people with disabilities and the need to promote an obstacle-free Canada. We want to build a strong Canada that is accessible.
Disability benefit and the Disability Inclusion Action Plan are building a more accessible and inclusive society for all. Can the Minister of Jobs and Families highlight how the Spring Economic Update is helping to build a barrier-free Canada?
Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Inclusivity is not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. And because when people have a chance to thrive, our entire country grows. I thank my colleague for his question, and in our economic update, we announced 43 disabilities that will be eligible for a streamlined disability tax credit application. We've also expanded the list of practitioners who can certify people for the credit. The Disability and Inclusion Action Plan and the Canada Accessibility Act will continue to guide our government's work towards a barrier-free Canada by 2040. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The question is for the Prime Minister. Obviously, American tariffs on Canada are wrong, but so is forced labor. And this Liberal government refuses to crack down on forced labor products coming into our supply chain from the Xinjiang province in China. For example, in 2024 alone, the Americans blocked 6,947 shipments of products originating in the Xinjiang province in order to stop forced labor. Here, this Liberal government only stopped 2 shipments in 5 years. Will the government ban all products coming from the Xinjiang province and end slavery once and for all?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has some of the most rigorous forced labor laws in the world, and we condemn forced labor everywhere it exists, including in my meeting last Friday with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of China. Every good that enters this country is subject to rigorous import controls and screening. We allocated $600 million in last year's budget to address forced labor, Mr. Speaker, and we prioritize the inclusion of comprehensive labor provisions in free trade agreements to promote international labor standards. We stand with workers everywhere.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
$600 million? They announced $600 million to stop 2 shipments, and they stand with workers everywhere in the world. Are you kidding, Mr. Speaker? They're undermining Canadian wages by having multinationals take away Canadian jobs and give them to regimes that use forced labor and slavery. And now Canadian workers are facing potential tariff threats, which will compound the cost to Canada. This Prime Minister has never condemned the genocide and slavery in the Xinjiang province because of his corporate interests. Will he stand up today and say that he's condemning that kind of forced labor in Xinjiang?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs on a very important question.
Mr. Speaker, I want to underline that Canada will always protect the rights of workers within and outside this country. The $600 million allocated in last year's budget is on top of a number of measures that we have taken in our negotiations, in our free trade agreements with other countries around the world, a point I emphasized last Friday when I spoke with China's Minister of Foreign Affairs. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that our economy at the same time has grown by more than 17% in terms of our export.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the question was for the Prime Minister. I asked if he would stand in this House and condemn the forced labor practices by the regime in Beijing carried out on people in the Xinjiang province. And I know that this is a tough issue for him, because his company is seeking to expand its business. His company in China, and his company took a $200 million loan from a Chinese state-backed bank, so he does not want to compromise those interests. Will he put people before profits and stand up today and condemn forced labor in the Xinjiang province? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Of Foreign Affairs on the front lines of our relationship with China and countries around the world. We wholeheartedly and emphatically condemned forced labor wherever it occurs. In addition, in our free trade negotiations with countries around the world, we underline and ensure that we are condemning forced labor. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to grow the Canadian economy strong, not only concluding 20 agreements on the economy and security and defense worldwide, but also ensuring that we're responsibly investing.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister refuses to stand up and condemn the forced labor in the Xinjiang province because, of course, he does not want to jeopardize his corporate profits, in which he's continually invested, Mr. Speaker, even though that it comes at the expense of Canadian workers. Canadian workers lose out when they have to compete with forced labor, and Canadian workers lose out when there are punitive tariffs as a result. So I'll give the Prime Minister one last chance. Put people before profit. Will the Prime Minister stand up and announce that he's going to ban shipments of any goods from the Xinjiang province, which is renowned for forced labor? Yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Speaker, thank you very much. As the minister before me said, forced labor is absolutely unacceptable. That is why we're working always hard to ensure that we have our supply chain completely protected. That's why various departments within Government of Canada, as per the strict laws we have in place, work all the time to ensure that we stop any shipments that is a result of forced labor. In fact, Speaker, that is why in all our trade agreements, we make sure that we have stringent labor provisions to uphold international labor standards. We will continue to do so to make sure that we protect Canadian workers and workers abroad.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Clearly, Donald Trump's tariffs are unjustified and unjustifiable. But forced labor is also unjustified and unjustifiable. But this Liberal government has done nothing to protect Canadians against products built with this slavery. Under Joe Biden, they stopped 6,947 shipments of products from the Xinjiang province. This Liberal government stopped 2 of them. When will this Liberal government ban products from Xinjiang?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, forced labor is unacceptable. We need to ensure that our supply chains on the global level are free of these abusive practices. We work closely with the ministers to ensure that there is no one resorting to forced labor in the supply chain. This is why we focus as a priority on including comprehensive provisions in the free trade agreement so that we can promote international labor laws.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the question was for the Prime Minister. We learned, in fact, we know that Canadian workers lose out whenever we import work that is made with forced labor because it reduces wages and takes away jobs from Canadians. And now Canadians could lose even more because of these tariffs from the U.S. that are linked to goods that are bought from those regions where they use forced labor. When will the Prime Minister finally take action to ban all products coming from Xinjiang? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, all goods entering the country are subject to import controls and to rigorous verification. The agency does everything required to intercept any of these goods that could be the result of forced labor and is accountable to Parliament for this work. We want to make sure we have high standards for all workers.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Prime Minister was asked a direct question. He refuses to stand up, and he can't even condemn forced labor and slavery because it runs counter to his corporate interest. And this is the old story with him. A small group of liberal insiders, members of the club, multinational corporations, get fabulously rich, making everyone else terribly poor. While his corporate profits have gone up and he's dodging his taxes on those profits, the Canadian people are suffering even more with the only recession in the G20. Will he stand up today and reverse those policies?
Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Because it's worth repeating that forced labor is completely unacceptable. We take all steps necessary to ensure that we keep our supply chain free from forced labor. We, in fact, put a lot of work and rigor into ensuring that in all our trade agreements, we have stringent labor standards and provisions according to international labor standards. We will continue to do that work. We will continue to enforce our laws. We will continue to make sure that our supply chain is free of forced labor so that we can protect Canadian workers and workers abroad.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, while Canadians suffer, this Prime Minister is silent. He sits back while 112,000 jobs have been lost in the first 3 months of this year alone. The second highest unemployment in the G7, the only recession in the G20, an economy that has lost investment in 5 consecutive quarters. $20 billion of net investment that has fled the country, a 32% increase in mortgage delinquencies, people who can't make their monthly payments and risk losing their homes. Will he stand up in the House of Commons and at least acknowledge that he created this recession so that he can tell us how he's going to reverse the policies so we can get out of it?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we've been busy to build the strongest economy in the G7. Mr. Speaker, we started with Budget 2025 with generational investment in infrastructure, in housing, in productivity, in our defense, Mr. Speaker. And you know what? The numbers that just came out prove it. In a sense, we've seen record level of investment in this country, Mr. Speaker. We have seen that investment in machinery and equipment is up, Mr. Speaker. We have seen that investment in intellectual property is up, Mr. Speaker. And we have seen that government spending is down, Mr. Speaker. We're going to build the strongest economy in the G7, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Instead of standing and answering the question, this Liberal Prime Minister has his Finance Minister not just state slogan after slogan after slogan, but slogans that are exactly false. He says one of their slogans is the fastest growing economy in the G7. He has the only recession in the G7. The other slogan is more investment when Statistics Canada says business capital investment fell 0.7% in the first quarter of 2026, the 5th consecutive quarterly decline. Then he says government spending is down. He's doubled the deficit. Why is it whenever they say something is up, it's down?
The Honourable Minister. Finance.
I'm quite happy to talk about numbers with the Leader of the Opposition. In fact, the OCDE came out this morning to say Canada would have the second fastest growing economy for 26 and 27, Mr. Speaker. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we're focused on affordability. And the good news is on the 5th of June, Mr. Speaker, 12 million Canadians will receive support, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we know how to build a strong economy. We know how to build a resilient economy, but we know how to take care of Canadians at the time of need, Mr. Speaker. We'll build Canada strong for all.
The Honourable Member for Argenteuil, La Petite Nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government is making historic investments to help communities build the infrastructure they need to grow, to prosper. Yesterday, we announced a major agreement with Quebec to support public transit and essential infrastructure in our communities. These investments help build stronger and better connected communities across Quebec. Can the minister explain how this agreement will translate into tangible benefits for Quebecers and their communities? The Honourable Minister for Housing and Infrastructure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for the question. Yesterday, in fact, with the Government of Quebec, we announced over $10 billion for infrastructure, public transit, one of the largest investments in the history of Quebec. These investments support the infrastructure needed for housing construction, healthcare infrastructure, as well as public transit. Mr. Speaker, the time has come to build.
Riding Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, documents now reveal that the Liberals' $300 million prescribed IT failure processed less than 5% of prescriptions at its peak. That means after burning through $300 million, prescribed IT failed to deliver 95% of prescriptions. When Conservatives on the Health Committee tried to investigate, Liberals MPs shut off the cameras. Then they abruptly shut down meetings. Yesterday, they blocked an emergency meeting to prevent the Health Minister from testifying. Why are the Liberals blocking the Health Committee from investigating a $300 million prescribed IT scandal?
The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder why the Conservatives are blocking the study on HIV that is constantly before the committee. They're constantly doing that. I don't think the Conservatives really seem to care about health. I've discussed the matter with you a number of times. Perhaps you could allow work to progress.
The Honourable Member for Similkameen, South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
The Liberals are denying Canadians transparency on the $300 million that was wasted on prescribed IT. At the Health Committee, they've turned off the cameras, shut down meetings, and blocked the minister from testifying. Conservatives are prepared to work through the summer to get to the bottom of this scandal. Why are the Liberals blocking the Health Committee from investigating this $300 million prescribed IT failure?
The Honourable Minister of Health. I'll reiterate that the Conservatives are actually stalling the work of the committee on the study they were doing on AIDS, because we're dealing with a crisis throughout this country that seems to be of no interest to them. I would add to that I appeared before Finance Committee 2 days ago, and a member from the opposition side, the Conservative, asked me questions about prescribed IT, and I answered those questions, Mr. Speaker. I think I've answered the Conservatives' questions.
Okay, we're having cross-cutting discussions here. Please, the honourable member from Vancouver Quadra, then the honourable member for Vernon. Yeah. The honourable member for Kitchener South, Hespeler.
Thank you, Speaker. Here's a question the Minister of Health has never answered. She knows that Prescribe IT was a $300 million waste of taxpayer money. She knows the organization in charge of that program was so badly run, she had to get the CEO fired just last month. Given that she knows all this, what I can't understand, why would she give that same organization, one who can't point to one tangible thing they've accomplished in 10 years, why would she give them another $50 million of taxpayer money this year? It doesn't make sense.
Shane. The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, I was unaware of the fact that I had given money to the organization between the money that was budgeted for, the $50 million that were provided for, and dispersed. Those are two separate things. What I would say to the opposition is this, as I've already said, we are currently revising the model for this organization, and I will affirm this. Yes, Canadians need a connected healthcare system and healthcare infrastructure within the country.
Newton.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have spent the last week talking down Canada's economy, industries, and workers. Meanwhile, our government is making historic investments to grow the economy and strengthen Canada's future. From tens of billions in infrastructure to reaching NATO's 2% target to $6 billion for the skilled trades. Can the minister tell Canadians how these investments are helping us respond to economic headwinds and build a more resilient and prosperous economy?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Question, Mr. Speaker, from a great member which has great leadership. Mr. Speaker, I have some good news. I know the Conservative can see good news when there's one in front of them, but let me tell them something, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in Budget 2025, we laid the foundation for growth in this country. We made generational investment in housing, generational investment in infrastructure, generational investment in productivity innovation, generational investment in our defense, Mr. Speaker, and that is leading us to have the second fastest growth in the G7, Mr. Speaker. We're going to build Canada strong together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Montmorency-Charlevoix. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We just had a lengthy question period, but once again, when the going gets tough, the Prime Minister won't stand up. He answered just 6 questions from the Leader of the Opposition and gave 0 answers, real answers, to explain why Canada is the only G20 country in recession. I'm going to give him another opportunity to do it. Second chance. Why is it that after all of these lofty speeches and empty promises, and despite the fact that all G7, G20 countries are operating under the same international conditions, why Canada is the only country to be hit by this liberal recession? Mr. Speaker, I'll start by commending the member for having had the opportunity to be the 4th member to ask a question aside from the Leader of the Opposition. Canadians don't understand why on this day, where we are announcing massive investments in forestry communities in Quebec and Canada, the day after we announced $10 billion for infrastructure throughout Quebec, why this member from Quebec can't stand up to discuss the ways Quebec is benefiting.
Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
Liberal government has sidelined Bill S2 as amended despite a court-ordered deadline to end sex and race-based discrimination and the second-generation cutoff in the Indian Act. The UN has called on Canada to fix this by adopting Bill S2 as amended. The majority of First Nations agree and do not want more consultation. Officials and ministers say it's up to the Prime Minister. So will the Prime Minister stop the delay tactics, meet with First Nations women leaders as requested, pass Bill S2 as amended now to end the discrimination and violations of the Charter and international law?
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous Services.
Thank you. I welcome this question. I think that member is well aware that S2 is in front of the committee for study. I welcome her input. We are there to ensure that enfranchisement, the intention of this bill, is responded to. We continue to work closely with groups across the country, hearing their input. I am open to supporting these communities because enfranchisement quantifies who Indigenous people are under the Indian Act, and this is what we are trying to remove, ensuring that we are removing the barriers of the Indian Act on First Nations people in this country. I am working on that.
I wish to draw the attention of members to the presence in the gallery of the Honourable Adriana Lagrange, Minister of Hospital and Surgical Health Services for the Province of Alberta.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Arthabaska has a point of order. Yes, point of order, Mr. Speaker. We are here to ask questions and to get answers. We can't note the absence of anyone. The Prime Minister was present here for a rare time. You don't have the right to say that. You don't have the right to somebody is present or absent. I'm not sure how many times I have to repeat the rule. So, it being 3:20, Pursuant to an order passed earlier today, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion of Mr. Halan relating to the business of supply. Call in the members.
The question is as follows. Mr. Halan, seconded by Mr. Patzer, moved that the House recognize that the Liberal Prime Minister has given Canada the 1. Only economy in recession in the G7. 2. Shall I dispense? No. 2. Worst household debt in the G7. 3. Worst housing costs in the G7. 4. Second highest unemployment in the G7. A third higher than in the United States. Accordingly, the House call on the Liberal Prime Minister to immediately present a plan to reverse all of the economic policies of the Liberal government, which have given Canada this G7's worst recession. The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favor of the motion, please rise.
Mr. Doherty.
Mr. Doherty.
Mr. Schmale.
Mr. Schmale.
Mr. Brock.
Mr. Brock.
Mr. Bazan.
Mr. Bazan.
Mrs. Block.
Mrs. Block.
Mr. Dentel.
Mr. Dentel.
Mr. Halan.
Mr. Halan.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mr. Seaback.
Mr. Seaback.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Richardson.
Mr. Richards.
Mr. Aitchison.
Mr. Aitchison.
Mr. Strahl.
Mr. Strahl.
Mr. Brassard.
Monsieur Brassard.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Beltud.
Mr. Berthold.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Workington.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mr. Morin.
Mr. Morin.
Mr. Ross.
Mr. Ross.
Madame Vien.
Madame Vien.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Van Popta.
Mr. Van Popta.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Tucker.
Mr. Tucker.
Mr. Steinley.
Mr. Steinley.
Mr. Lobb.
Mr. Lobb.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Reddecock.
Mr. Reddecock.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Waugh.
Mr. Waugh.
Ms. Rude.
Ms. Rude.
Mr. Ho.
Mr. Ho.
Mrs. Falk, Battleford, Lloydminster, Meadow Lake.
Mrs. Falk, Battleford, Lloydminster, Meadow Lake.
Mr. Halsey.
Monsieur Hardy.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mrs. Goodrich.
Mrs. Goodrich.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Monsieur Madat Kapiskasing Timmins Mushkagawak.
Monsieur Madat Kapiskasing Timmins Mushkagawak.
Monsieur Lefebvre.
Monsieur Lefebvre.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Allison.
Mr. Allison.
Mr. Diot.
Mr. Diot.
Mr. Macaulay.
Mr. Macaulay.
Mr. Menegakis.
Mr. Menegakis.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mr. Abu Taif.
Mr. Abu Taif.
Mr. Motz.
Mr. Motz.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mr. Patzer.
Mr. Patzer.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson.
Mrs. Anstey.
Mrs. Anstey.
Mr. Au.
Mr. Au.
Mr. Babber.
Mr. Babber.
Mr. Bélanger, Sudbury S. Manitoulin, Nickel Belt.
Mr. Bélanger, Sudbury S. Manitoulin, Nickel Belt.
Mr. Bexty.
Mr. Bexty.
Mrs. Cody.
Mrs. Cody.
Mr. Davies, Niagara South.
Mr. Davies, Niagara South.
Mr. Dawson.
Mr. Dawson.
Mrs. DeRitter.
Mrs. DeRitter.
Mr. Gill, Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Gill, Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Gill, Brampton West.
Mr. Gill, Brampton West.
Mr. Gill, Calgary McKnight.
Mr. Gill, Calgary McKnight.
Mr. Gill, Windsor West.
Mr. Gill, Windsor West.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. Holman.
Mr. Holman.
Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Jackson.
Ms. Kirkland.
Ms. Kirkland.
Mrs. Conans.
Mrs. Conans.
Ms. Cronus.
Ms. Cronus.
Mr. Curick.
Mr. Curick.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Mahal.
Mr. Mahal.
Mr. McKenzie.
Mr. McKenzie.
Mr. Reynolds.
Mr. Reynolds.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Stevenson.
Mr. Stevenson.
Ms. Kwan.
Ms. Kwan.
Mr. Davies, Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Davies, Vancouver Kingsway.
Ms. McPherson.
Ms. McPherson.
Ms. May.
Ms. May.
Ms. Gazan.
Ms. Gazan.
Mr. Johns.
Mr. Johns.
All those opposed to the motion will please rise.
Mr. McKinnon-Gatineau.
Mr. McKinnon-Gatineau.
Mr. Ali.
Mr. Ali.
Madame Diab.
Madame Diab.
Mr. McDonald-Malpeck.
Mr. McDonald-Malpeck.
Mr. McGinty.
Mr. McGinty.
Mr. Lightbound.
Mr. Lightbound.
Mr. Robertson.
Mr. Robertson.
Mr. Champagne.
Mr. Champagne.
Ms. Thompson.
Ms. Thompson.
Madame Michel.
Madame Michel.
Ms. Olszewski.
Ms. Olszewski.
Mr. Solomon.
Mr. Solomon.
Mrs. Valdez.
Mrs. Valdez.
Ms. Gould.
Ms. Gould.
Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
Ms. Fry.
Ms. Fry.
Ms. Jacek.
Ms. Jazik.
Mr. Osborne.
Mr. Osborne.
Mr. Fragascatos.
Mr. Fragascatos.
Mr. Fuhrer.
Mr. Fuhrer.
Madame Provost.
Madame Provost.
Ms. Sahota.
Ms. Sahota.
Ms. Chartrand.
Ms. Chartrand.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Ms. Anand.
Ms. Anand.
Ms. Alti.
Ms. Alti.
Mrs. Gulmasti.
Mrs. Gulmasti.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Long.
Mr. Long.
Mr. Zaricelli.
Mr. Zaricelli.
Madame Chenette.
Madame Chenette.
Ms. Latenzio.
Ms. Latenzio.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Housefather.
Madame Menard.
Madame Menard.
Ms. Scrow.
Ms. Scrow.
Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Dollywall.
Mr. Dollywall.
Mr. Biddle.
Mr. Biddle.
Madame Châtel.
Madame Châtel.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Letao.
Mr. Letao.
Mr. Bardisi.
Mr. Bardisi.
Madame Kayabaga.
Madame Kayabaga.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Madame Brière.
Madame Brière.
Mr. Turnbull.
Mr. Turnbull.
Mr. Calloway.
Mr. Calloway.
Mr. Gay.
Mr. Gay.
Ms. Chi.
Ms. Chi.
Mr. Miles.
Mr. Miles.
Mr. Cormier.
Mr. Cormier.
Ms. Dillon.
Ms. Dillon.
Ms. Zarowitz.
Ms. Zarowitz.
Monsieur El-Khoury.
Monsieur El-Khoury.
Monsieur Fergus.
Monsieur Fergus.
Mr. Fonseca.
Mr. Fonseca.
Ms. Gledoux.
Ms. Gledoux.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Ms. Suds.
Ms. Suds.
Madame Desrochers.
Madame Desrochers.
Mrs. McKelvey.
Mrs. McKelvey.
Mr. Gasparo.
Mr. Gasparo.
Mr. Hanley.
Mr. Hanley.
Madame Rochefort.
Madame Rochefort.
Madame Bendayen.
Madame Bendayen.
Madame Fortier.
Madame Fortier.
Mr. Baptiste.
Mr. Baptiste.
Mr. Clausen.
Mr. Clausen.
Madame Lavac.
Madame Lavac.
Monsieur Ramsey.
Monsieur Ramsey.
Ms. Church.
Ms. Church.
Mr. McKinnon, Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McKinnon, Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Schiefke.
Monsieur Schiefke.
Ms. Sahota, Brampton South.
Ms. Sidhu.
Ms. Sidhu, Brampton South.
Ms. Sidhu, Brampton South.
Ms. Vandenveld.
Ms. Vandenveld.
Mrs. Zaid.
Mrs. Zaid.
Ms. Yip.
Ms. Yip.
Mr. Baker.
Mr. Baker.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Madame Lalonde.
Madame Lalonde.
Mr. Pulowski.
Mr. Pulowski.
Mr. Zuberi.
Monsieur Zuberi.
Madame Lapointe, Rivière des Mille-Îles.
Madame Lapointe, Rivière des Mille-Îles.
Mr. Coteau.
Mr. Coteau.
Ms. Hefner.
Miss Hefner.
Ms. Idlout.
Miss Idlout.
Madame Lapointe Sudbury.
Madame Lapointe Sudbury.
Mr. Sousa.
Mr. Sousa.
Mr. Carr.
Mr. Carr.
Ms. Akan.
Ms. Akan.
Mr. Al Saoud.
Mr. Al Saoud.
Madame Auguste.
Madame Auguste.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Clark.
Mr. Clark.
Mr. Connors.
Mr. Connors.
Madame Donduran.
Madame Dandurand.
Mr. Danko.
Mr. Danko.
Monsieur Deschênes Thériault.
Monsieur Deschênes Thériault.
Mr. Earl.
Mr. Earl.
Ms. Fancy.
Ms. Fancy.
Mr. Greaves.
Mr. Greaves.
Ms. Harrison.
Ms. Harrison.
Ms. Hurtle.
Ms. Hurtle.
Mr. Joseph.
Mr. Joseph.
Monsieur Lavoie.
Monsieur Lavoie.
Mr. Ma.
Mr. Ma.
Mr. Millette Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Millette Bay of Quinte.
Ms. Miedema.
Ms. Miedema.
Madame Mingarelli.
Madame Mingarelli.
Ms. Nathan.
Ms. Nathan.
Ms. Wien.
Ms. Wien.
Ms. O'Rourke.
Ms. O'Rourke.
Mr. Rana.
Mr. Rana.
Ms. Royer.
Ms. Royer.
Mr. Saini.
Mr. Saini.
Mr. Sari.
Mr. Sari.
Mr. Sawatsky.
Mr. Sawatsky.
Ms. Sodi.
Ms. Sodi.
Mr. St. Pierre.
Mr. St. Pierre.
Ms. Tesser-Dirksen.
Ms. Tesser-Dirksen.
Monsieur Villeneuve.
Mr. Villeneuve.
Monsieur Watchorn.
Mr. Watchorn.
Ms. Begum.
Ms. Begum.
Ms. Martin.
Ms. Martin.
Madame Mendez.
Madame Mendez.
Monsieur Garon.
Monsieur Garon.
Madame Normandin.
Madame Normandin.
Monsieur Fortin.
Monsieur Fortin.
Monsieur Champoux.
Monsieur Champoux.
Monsieur Perron.
Monsieur Perron.
Monsieur Deschaines.
Monsieur Deschaines.
Madame Gill, Côte-Nord, Kawachikama, Nitasinan.
Madame Gill, Côte-Nord, Kawichikamatch, Nitsin.
Monsieur Bonnet.
Monsieur Bonnet.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie.
Madame Laroche.
Madame Laroche.
Madame Gaudreau.
Madame Gaudreau.
Monsieur Barcelot-Duval.
Monsieur Barcelot-Duval.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca.
Monsieur Lemire.
Monsieur Lemire.
La Chambre.
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming its proceedings.